Okay, so we're going to run through a few more feedback items. When we were doing the boot camp, there was a lot of interest in us providing this type of information. So we went through and really tried to find a lot of the common comments that were being provided and those that we think were most important. Okay, so for risk description, use description. So this is the one where we talked about the potential event, the condition, and the cause and all of that. So a lot of comments associated with the risk not being clear and us not understanding the impact. Don Bopp, certain organizations have specific strategic requirements identified in the BOP. So when we go and we look at the focus areas, if we see that an organization is responsible for an initiative, then we're going to be going through and looking in your risk assessment to see if we can see that it wasn't included. And if it's not, then we're going to provide a comment asking why. And it still may not be something that is a focus for your organization, and you can provide an explanation for why it's not being included, or maybe it's being included somewhere else or something like that. There's a lot of different reasons why you might not be including it, but that is a common comment. If we're not seeing it, or if we're not sure that it's been totally covered, then we might provide you feedback associated with that. Control activity description. So again, this is one where if we don't see all the elements we're asking for of a control activity or an internal control, then we're going to indicate that it should include those elements. And we understand that you might not be able to provide those details at this time, but that we would expect that once you've tested it and looked at it more closely, that you would be able to provide all of the elements that support that it's an internal control. Risk response. So a lot of folks don't choose a risk response. We're just, it's helpful if you guys can do that. If you don't, then, or you're not sure, then you can reach out to us, or in our feedback, we'll typically provide you with our recommendation. But just want to make sure that that's something that's being captured. And that's not just for us. I mean, it's useful for your organization as well. I think if I'm a manager and I own a bunch of risks, I'm going to want to know which ones I'm saying I'm accepting risk on, and be sure that that's what I want to be communicating to leadership. Risk numbering. So this isn't a deal breaker or anything, but it is helpful when you number the risks in a way that is something that we can follow. There are certain organizations who have provided a numbering that is unclear as to its methodology, which makes it difficult for us to track or reference. So just want to make sure risk numberings, that you guys are putting some sort of risk numbering in there that's logical. Next slide. Matt? Okie dokie. So then testing. So again, sometimes when we get the draft risk assessments, they're not fully complete. The organization hasn't determined whether they're going to be testing or not. So they may have left the testing column blank in terms of whether they're going to be testing it this year. So we're going to point that out and just make sure that you guys understand that you need to make that selection so that it auto-populates the ICE tab, so that you don't have to re-enter everything into the ICE tab. So there is some columns that are repetitive from the risk assessment, and we're trying to cut down on that work for you, so that you don't have to re-enter all that information. So you're going to want to check yes, so all that stuff copies over for you. So we also have had some feedback later, and during the ICE testing, we'll highlight this, but then even, there is DON-wide testing that's being performed over areas like CivPay and MilPay, and certain ENC of assets, and we're continuing to add things as they come into remediation. So we may let you know if you're, for example, testing sick pay or mill pay, then we might just let you know that we are also testing that from a Don-wide perspective, and it might be to your benefit to reach out to the testing team to coordinate. Obviously, when the Don testing team selects its sample, it's at a much higher level and it's across all of the organizations. So their testing shouldn't necessarily take the place of your testing. It's just that you might want to coordinate with them. So at least, if they pull 3 samples, you can leverage those 3 samples for whatever testing you're performing as well. So just a timing thing and a coordination thing. It's something that we'll highlight and recommend to you. It also allows you to go out and look at the RCMs that they've created associated with those processes to see if there's anything you can leverage from their test plan. Additional risk response. So this is where for some folks, I guess, have copied the same response, the same control activity as their additional response, and that's not necessary. Basically, you have your first risk response. If that's all you're going to do, you don't have any additional controls, then in the additional risk response, you can just indicate NA and why it's NA. It's NA, first control activity is sufficient or something like that, and then it's clear that you don't need a second control. Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about top risks on a future slide. But another comment we have is that there is a top risks tab in the risk assessment where we are asking each organization to identify their top 3 risks to mission and objectives for us. And this is just from a management perspective, it allows us to see what your 3 key risks are. It allows us to communicate this information to the enterprise risk management team, the integrated risk management team, to help them as they're starting to go through their process, of creating the future of this program. So if there are questions about the top risks or what needs to go in there, just want to make sure it's clear that these 3 risks should already be in your risk assessment, and maybe you look at your priority ones, and then you pick your top 3 from there, and then you put them in the top 3 tab. And then we ask a little bit more detail, a little bit more questions associated with those risks to hopefully help answer any questions you might get from leadership. And then it helps us if we have to reach back later to have a conversation with you guys about those 3, we can do that.